The cabin lights flickered, and the sound of panic echoed through the narrow aisle. A man collapsed near the first-class section, his body limp, and his lips turning pale. People gasped. Flight attendants rushed forward, their voices trembling, as they called for help, but no one seemed to know what to do. Passengers stared, frozen, some whispering the name of the man, realizing with shock that it was not just any passenger, but a world-famous celebrity, whose face was known everywhere. Cameras clicked, phones raised, but no one dared step closer until an older woman stood up from her seat, her hands shaking, not from fear, but from memory. She had lived this moment too many times in hospital wards across her career. She was a retired nurse, but in that instant retirement meant nothing. She pushed through the crowd, her voice steady, commanding, yet filled with urgency. "Move back, give him air," she said, as she dropped to her knees beside him, her fingers pressed against his neck, feeling for a pulse. It was faint, irregular, his chest barely rising. She shouted for the attendants to bring the medical kit, an oxygen mask, but her eyes never left the man lying before her. He was gasping, fighting for air. She tilted his head back, checking his airway, then began compressions, each push of her hands fueled by determination. Sweat formed on her forehead as passengers whispered in author. Seconds dragged like hours. The plane felt like it was holding its breath. Then suddenly his chest heaved and a cough broke free. He opened his eyes, disoriented, his gaze locking onto hers for a split second, and in that look there was something strange, not just gratitude, but a flicker of recognition, like he knew her, like her face was tied to something from his past. But before she could make sense of it, the attendants hurried with oxygen. She secured the mask over his face, guiding his breaths, while her own heart pounded, not from exertion, but from an unsettling sense that this was more than a medical emergency. The passengers erupted in relief, clapping, some crying, as the announcement came over the speaker that a nurse had saved the celebrity's life. Yet the nurse herself sat back in her seat, her hands trembling, her mind clouded by the way he had stared at her with wide, startled eyes, like she had just pulled a secret out of his chest, instead of saving his breath. As the flight continued, the man was stabilized. Attendants stayed near him, but his gaze kept drifting to the woman across the aisle. She felt it each time, heavy, like a question waiting to be asked. Finally, as the cabin dimmed for rest, he motioned weakly to a steward, whispering something. Soon the steward approached her, saying the man wanted to see her privately. She hesitated, her pulse racing, but curiosity pulled her to the quiet corner, where he sat, half-reclined, pale but breathing. His voice was rough, soft, yet deliberate. "Thank you," he said, "you saved me." But then he leaned closer, lowering his voice so no one else could hear, and what he whispered into her ear made her knees weaken. He said this was not the first time she had saved his life. Years ago, before he was famous, before the world knew his name, he had crossed paths with her in a hospital. And something had happened, something she had no memory of. Her throat tightened, confusion swirling inside her. She had treated thousands of patients over decades of nursing, but his words carried weight, heavy with truth and hidden meaning. "What do you mean?" she whispered back, but before he could answer, a sudden turbulence shook the plane. Attendants called passengers to return to their seats. The moment shattered, she was ushered back to her place, heart-thundering thoughts spinning as the plane steadied. She stared out the small oval window of the night sky, endless, her reflection faint in the glass. The man across the aisle watching her with eyes that held not only gratitude, but a secret too deep to ignore. She could feel it pressing against the silence between them, a truth waiting to escape. And when the plane finally touched down and passengers prepared to disembark, the celebrity leaned toward her one last time, his lips barely moving as he murmured, "I owe you more than you realize. And the reward I will give you will not be money, it will be the truth, but the truth may break you." Words lodged inside her like a blade, sharp enough to tear open memories she did not yet understand. She stepped off the plane, her legs heavy, the world outside blinding with cameras, flashing reporters, screaming questions about the celebrity's health. Yet in her heart, she knew the real story had not even begun. The real story was the secret he promised to reveal. And as she walked away from the gate, blending into the crowd, her phone buzzed in her pocket 3 times. One after another, she pulled it out, her eyes widening at the message displayed across the screen, a message with no sender. Just 7 chilling words: "You should never have saved his life." Her phone trembled in her hand as she stared at the words. No name, no number, just that chilling message: "You should never have saved his life." The airport crowd moved around her in a blur, voices echoing, flashes from cameras bouncing off-glass walls, but all she could hear was the echo of that single sentence rattling in her head. Who would send such a thing, and why? Her breath grew shallow, as if the air itself was warning her that she had stepped into something far darker than she understood. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself it was some sick prank, maybe a fan who disliked the celebrity, but the unease refused to leave her chest. Every step toward baggage claim felt heavier, and when she turned her head she saw him. Again, the man she had just saved, the celebrity whose name the world shouted in lights, his security detail, clearing a path for him. Yet his eyes broke through the distance, locking onto hers. He gave a faint nod, not of thanks but of knowing, as though he too was aware of the message she just received. She clutched her bag and walked faster, her heart racing. The automatic doors opened, and the cool night air rushed against her face, the chaos of waiting fans screaming. His name filled the parking area. She tried to slip into the crowd, to vanish into the normal world. She had lived quietly since retiring, but her phone buzzed again. Another message, this time more direct. If you talk to him, you will regret it. Her breath caught. She stopped in her tracks, glancing around at the faces blurred by excitement, at the noise of chanting crowds, but somewhere among them someone was watching her, someone who knew her number, her past, and her every move. She shoved the phone back into her pocket, forcing herself toward the taxi line, yet deep down she already knew she could not just walk away. Something about the look in his eyes, the strange recognition, the promise of truth, all of it tied her fate to his, whether she wanted it or not. Taxi ride was silent, the driver humming softly while the city lights flickered by, but her mind replayed the moment on the plane. His whisper about her saving him once before. She tried to search her memory, every face, every patient, but nothing surfaced. Thousands had passed under her care, but his story lingered. Like a ghost, she did not remember the puzzle pressed against her ribs until her chest ached when she finally reached her small apartment. She collapsed onto the chair, her trembling hands holding the phone. She opened the messages again, but before she could scroll further, another one appeared. This time it was not a warning, it was a picture. A grainy image of her younger self in a nurse uniform, standing beside a hospital bed, and in that bed, lying weak but alive, was him, the celebrity, before fame, before fortune, decades ago. Her stomach knotted. She gasped, her hand covering her mouth. She had no recollection of the moment, yet there it was, undeniable proof that he spoke the truth. She had treated him long before tonight. But why had she forgotten what had happened, and why did someone not want her to remember? Sleep never came that night. She sat by the window, staring at the streets below, as the city dimmed to silence. Her mind restless with fear and questions. By morning, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, but answered a man's voice, calm yet urgent filled her ear. Do not hang up. You are in danger. You saved the wrong man. He is not who you think. Her throat tightened. Who are you? She asked, but the line went dead, leaving only static in her ear. She sat frozen, phone pressed to her chest, feeling the walls around her life crumble, the mystery clawing its way into her every breath. Later that day, a knock rattled her door. She peeked through the peephole, her heart skipping when she saw him standing there, disguised in a cap and glasses, but unmistakable. He had come alone, no security, no fans, just him, his hand resting against the door, as if he knew she was watching. She opened slowly, suspicion and fear burning in her veins. Why are you here? She demanded. His eyes softened yet carried shadows. You deserve to know, he said. Last night, I promised you the truth, and you must hear it now, before it is too late. She let him in reluctantly, the air between them heavy. He sat at her small table, his hands clasped like a man preparing to confess a sin. Years ago, he began, his voice trembling. I was in a hospital near death. My career had not yet begun, and my life was drowning in debts and mistakes I had made. Enemies, powerful enemies who wanted me gone. You were my nurse then, and you did more than save me. You became the only witness to something I swore I would bury forever. Her breath caught. What did I witness? She whispered. He looked into her eyes, his voice low. You witnessed a death, one that never should have happened. Confusion ripped through her chest. A death? What did he mean? She tried to remember, tried to see past the fog of years, but nothing came, only the photograph on her phone proving she had been there. He reached across the table, gripping her hand, his voice urgent. You were not supposed to remember, they made sure of it, but now fate has brought us together again, and they will come for you, because you saved me once more. Before she could respond, the window shattered, glass exploding inward, a shadowy figure diving into the room, masked and armed. She screamed. He pulled her down as the intruder lunged, a blade glinting in his hand. The struggle erupted, chaos filling the small apartment, furniture Crashing voices shouting, the masked figure aimed for him, but she grabbed a heavy lamp, striking the attackers. Armed with desperate strength, the knife clattered to the floor as the man bolted through the broken window, disappearing into the night silence. Followed only the sound of her heart thundering in her chest, her breath ragged. He held her tightly, whispering, "They know you are with me now. You are in this whether you want it or not." Apartment was in ruins, the glass littered across the floor. Her safe, quiet life shattered in seconds, and as she looked at him, the man whose life she had saved twice now, she realized his secret was not just about the past. It was about survival, betrayal, and something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. He leaned closer, his voice trembling with both fear and resolve. "If you stay with me, you will learn everything. If you walk away, you may still be hunted, but never know why. You must decide now." Her chest tightened, her eyes burning with fear and anger. The choice before her was impossible: walk away into uncertainty, or step deeper into the storm with him, and face the truth, buried for years. But before she could answer, the lights in her apartment cut out, plunging them both into darkness. A voice from the hallway rang clear and cold. "You should have let him die." The darkness pressed against her skin like a living thing. Every muscle in her body tensed as the voice echoed from the hallway. "You should have let him die." She froze, holding her breath. The man she had saved gripped her arm, pulling her away from the shattered window, his whisper urgent, "Stay low, do not move." Silence stretched. The seconds-long footsteps creaked closer, slow, deliberate, as if whoever was out there wanted them to hear every step. Her pulse raced, her eyes searched the room for anything that could protect them. Her trembling fingers brushed against the fallen lamp she had used before the door handle turned a faint metallic click, slicing through the silence. The man leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Trust me." Before she could ask what he meant, he darted toward the kitchen, pulling her with him. He opened a narrow utility closet, pushing her inside the darkness. Swallowing them both, she could feel his breath, quick and ragged, against her hair. The closet smelled of dust and paint, but all she focused on were the sounds outside the door, opening, the footsteps entering her apartment. Heavy boots crunching on broken glass. The voice returned, colder than before. "She saved you once. She saved you twice. She will not save you again." Her heart pounded. The figure moved, slowly, overturning chairs, rummaging through her drawers as though searching for something important. She held her breath, afraid even the faintest sound would betray their hiding place. The man's hand tightened on hers, steadying her. The figure lingered for minutes that felt like hours before finally retreating, footsteps fading into the hallway. The door shut, silence returning at last. She exhaled, shaking, as the man guided her out of the closet, his face pale, his eyes sharp. "This is just the beginning," he said. "They know where you live. They will never stop now." Her legs trembled as she sank into a chair, shattered glass crunching beneath her feet. "Tell me the truth," she demanded, her voice breaking. "Who are they? What death did I witness? What are you hiding?" He hesitated, his hands running through his hair, eyes full of torment and regret. "You do not remember because they made you forget," he said. "But I remember everything, and if you stand by me, you will too." He began, pacing, his voice low and tense. "Years ago I was in the hospital, not just for illness, but because I had been poisoned by people I trusted. They wanted to silence me, because I had discovered something dangerous, something tied to money, politics, and betrayal. The night you treated me, there was another patient in the room, a man who should have lived, but instead he was killed right before your eyes, and you saw it. You saw who did it. You were the only witness, but they erased it from you. They made sure your memory was buried." Her chest tightened. She tried to force the memories back, but all she found was fog. The photograph proved she had been there, but her mind held only emptiness. She whispered brokenly, "If I saw a murder, why am I still alive?" He looked at her with grim intensity. "Because they thought you had forgotten. They never imagined fate would cross our paths again. But now you saved me twice, and they know you are remembering. They will come for you until you are gone." Her throat tightened, tears welling in her eyes. The life she had lived quietly in retirement, now shattered by shadows of a past she did not recall, but somewhere deep inside she felt a stirring, a flicker of something buried, a sound, a scream, a flash of light. She gasped, clutching her head, fragments of memory breaking through. For a split second, she saw a figure in a hospital uniform, standing over a man on a bed, pressing something to his mouth. Then darkness again. She looked at him, her voice shaking. "I saw something, someone in uniform." He nodded. "You are beginning to remember, but the more you do, the more dangerous it becomes." Before she could speak again, A loud banging rattled her door. Police open up her breath. Hitched she turned to him, but his face hardened. Do not trust them, he whispered. They are not here to protect you. They are here for Mitha. Banging grew louder, her door shaking under the weight of fists. She hesitated, caught between the instinct to run and the fear of making the wrong choice. Finally she stepped toward the door, her voice trembling. Who is it? A sharp voice replied. Police department, ma'am. We received reports of a break-in. We need to check inside. But when she glanced back at him, his expression was fierce, shaking his head. No, not police, he hissed. She froze, torn between two realities. The banging continued, more urgent. Now open up, ma'am, or we will force entry. Her breath quickened. Her heart pounded. If they were real police and she refused, it could destroy her life. But if he was right, opening that door would seal her fate. Her trembling hands hovered near the lock. He grabbed her wrist, whispering desperately, "You must choose me or them. If you open that door, everything ends." Here the handle rattled, the sound of metal grinding. They were forcing the lock. Panic surged through her chest. She made her choice, pulling him toward the fire escape window together. They climbed out into the night, cold air slamming against their skin the moment their feet hit the alley. Below, the door burst open, above shouts echoing through the walls. Flashlights sweeping across the room, they ran through the shadows, breathless, the city swallowing them in its endless maze. Her legs burned, her chest ached, but fear drove her forward. Until they collapsed behind an abandoned warehouse, the man leaning against the wall, clutching his chest, still weak from his ordeal. On the plane she looked at him, anger and fear boiling together. "You have dragged me into this nightmare," she said, her voice trembling. "Tell me everything now. No more secrets." His eyes locked onto hers, dark and haunted. "You want the truth? Then listen. The man who died that night was not just anyone. He was a whistleblower. He had proof of corruption, proof that would have destroyed some of the most powerful men in the world, and you were the only witness to his murder. They spared you because you were just a nurse, because they erased it from your mind. But now that you saved me again, they believe we are connected, and they are terrified you will remember her." Mind reeled to pieces, twisting in her head. A whistleblower murdered in cold blood, a memory stolen from her, and a celebrity whose survival tied them together. She pressed her back against the wall, the weight of it all crushing her, voice breaking. She asked, "Why me? Why did I have to be the one?" He reached for her hand, his grip firm. "Because fate chose you," he said, "and now fate demands we finish what was started." As he spoke, the faint buzz of her phone filled the silence. She pulled it out, hesitating before looking at the screen. Another message, no sender, just 5 words. "This time you cannot run forever." She dropped the phone, her breath shattering in the night, her hands trembling, her eyes lifting to meet his hiss, face pale but determined. And in that moment she knew there was no turning back, no safe return. The truth was coming for her whether she wanted it or not, and it would not stop until every secret was revealed. Then the distant roar of engines filled the alley, headlights sweeping across the walls, black vans screeching to a halt, masked figures pouring out, weapons drawn, their shadows stretching long against the night. He pulled her close, his whisper urgent and fierce. "It is time to fight for the truth." The roar of engines grew louder, the vans halting at the mouth of the alley, doors slamming open, masked figures spilling out, their boots hitting the pavement with mechanical rhythm, their weapons gleaming under the dim streetlights. She clutched the man's arm, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it would give them away. He pulled her into the shadow of the warehouse, whispering low and urgent, "Stay close. Do not look back." The figures moved in formation, sweeping flashlights across walls and dumpsters, hunting them like wolves, circling prey. She felt her knees weaken, but adrenaline forced her forward, every nerve alive with terror. They ran through the narrow passage between buildings, the sound of shouts chasing them, bullets ricocheting off metal, sending sparks into the darkness. He pulled her into a side door, half rusted, hanging off its hinges. They slipped inside, stumbling into a cavernous room filled with dust and broken machinery, the air thick and choking. He guided her deeper, weaving through shadows. His breath heavy, but determined footsteps thundered behind them, the masked pursuers closing in. She could hear their radios crackling, voices ordering to capture, not kill. She froze at those words, her chest tightening. If they wanted to capture, not kill, it meant her life still held value. But for what reason? The thought shook her more than death itself. The man led her up a staircase, their feet pounding on rusted steps, the metal groaning underweight. They emerged onto a catwalk high above the warehouse floor. He pointed toward a shattered window at the far end. a way out, but as they neared the window, a figure rose from the shadows, blocking their path, his mask different, marked with red stripes, his voice low and commanding. "You cannot escape, you know too much." The man she had saved stepped forward, shielding her, his own voice, sharp and angry. "She knows nothing, leave her out of this." The masked leader tilted his head, almost amused. "She remembers more than she realizes, and when she remembers, it will end us all. That is why she cannot live." The words sliced into her heart, her throat dry. She tried to speak, but fear clamped her tongue. Yet somewhere deep inside, his words rattled loose. Another fragment of memory, a room dimly lit, a patient gasping for breath, her own hands trembling as she charted vitals. And then the sudden stillness of a body that should have lived, but did not. Her vision blurred, her stomach turned. She staggered back, whispering, "I saw it. I saw someone kill him." The masked leader's gaze sharpened behind the fabric of his mask. "Yes," he said coldly, "and now you will see no more." He raised his weapon, but before the shot could fire, the man lunged, tackling him. The two crashed to the floor, grappling fiercely, the weapon skidding across the catwalk. She scrambled forward, kicking it away, her hands shaking. She grabbed a rusted pipe from the ground and swung it with desperate strength, striking the masked leader across the arm. He howled. Staggering, the man seized the chance. Pulling her toward the window, together they smashed through the broken glass, tumbling onto the rooftop. Outside, the city sprawled before them, neon lights flickering against the night. Sky sirens wailing in the distance. Their bodies ached from the fall, but there was no time to pause. Behind them, shouts grew louder, the masked pursuers climbing after them across the rooftop. She ran, gasping for air, her legs burning, her mind reeling with fear, and fragments of memory bleeding through. They leaped from rooftop to rooftop, the city beneath them a blur of lights and traffic. Her heart felt like it would burst, yet adrenaline carried her forward. Finally they ducked into a stairwell, descending into the streets below, blending into the chaos of the city, the masked figures momentarily losing sight of them. They staggered into an abandoned motel, the paint peeling, the air heavy with mildew. He collapsed into a chair, clutching his chest, sweat dripping from his face. She knelt beside him, tears burning her eyes. "You are not well," she whispered. "You cannot keep running." He shook his head, voice ragged. "I cannot stop. Not now. Not until you know the whole truth." She grabbed his hand, her voice trembling. "Then tell me everything." Now his eyes searched hers, dark with regret. "I never wanted you involved," he said, "but it was never just about me or the whistleblower. It was about power, control, money, so vast it could buy governments." He paused, swallowing hard. "The man who died, the one you saw, was going to expose them. He had evidence stored away, hidden somewhere. Only he knew they killed him before he could reveal it, and you were the only witness." His eyes lowered. "You were supposed to be silenced too, but someone protected you, someone inside their circle wiped your memory and let you live." Her head spun with the revelation. "Who would protect me?" she whispered. "Why would they risk everything for me?" He looked at her, his eyes haunted. "Because you are not just a witness, you are tied to all of this, more than you know." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a worn photograph, sliding it across the table. Her trembling fingers lifted it, her eyes widening at the sight. It was a picture of her younger self in her nurse uniform, standing beside a man she did not recognize, but his arm was around her shoulders, his face half hidden in shadow. Her stomach clenched. "Who is he?" she asked, voice cracking. The man's expression hardened. "He was the one who ordered the murder, and the one who protected you. He is both your enemy and your savior." Her heart stopped cold, confusion and horror colliding. "Why would he protect me if he ordered the murder?" she demanded. The man leaned closer, his whisper sharp. "Because he is connected to you by blood." The words shattered her like glass. She stared at him, eyes wide, disbelief clawing at her chest. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No, that cannot be true." He nodded solemnly. "Yes, he is your brother." Her world collapsed, the room spinning, her breath choking her chest. She clutched the table for balance, tears spilling down her cheeks. Her brother, a murderer, a protector, a monster. In the shadows, everything inside her screamed denial, but deep down she knew the truth in his words. Before she could speak, the sound of engines filled the street outside. Black vans pulling up, lights flashing, doors slamming, voices shouting they had been found again. He pulled her to her feet, his voice fierce. "We must go now." But she barely moved, her heart broken, her mind fractured by the revelation. He shook her, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. They will kill us both. Unless you fight, you must choose whether to face him or run forever." Her tears fell hot onto his hands, her voice trembling. "I cannot face him. He is my blood," he whispered back. "Blood does not erase betrayal, and if you do not face him, he will destroy youth." Door of the motel burst open, masked figures storming inside. She grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the back door, determination igniting through her pain. She could not fall apart now, not when the truth was so close. They ran into the night, the city lights flashing around them. Her heart torn between fear, grief, and a rage that grew stronger with every step. They vanished into the shadows, a single thought seared into her mind. If her brother truly was behind the murder and the erasure of her memory, then saving the celebrity mid-flight had not been fate, it had been the spark to ignite a reckoning that would burn everything to the ground. The city was alive with sirens and shadows, the sound of pursuit, never far behind as she and the man pressed deeper into the maze of streets. Her chest burned from the weight of the revelation. Her brother, the man she had trusted as family, the one she believed distant but still. Blood had ordered a killing and then protected her, not from kindness, but from calculation. Her mind struggled to piece it together, yet every step forward made the truth heavier. They slipped into an underground parking garage, the concrete echoing with dripping water. The man leaned against a pillar, his breath ragged, his strength faltering. She steadied him, her voice trembling. "You cannot keep going like this." He shook his head, his eyes locked onto hers. "We have no choice. The evidence, the whistleblower left behind, still exists, and your brother has been hunting it for years. If we find it first, we can bring him down. If not, he will silence us forever." Hands tightened into fists. The thought of her brother shattered the remnants of her past. The face she once smiled at during family gatherings, now blurred with shadows and blood. She whispered, "Where is this evidence? How can we find it?" He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, its edges worn, its pages nearly falling apart. "This belonged to the whistleblower," he said, his eyes searching hers. "He had written notes, codes, locations, and before he died he handed it to me. I never knew how to solve it, but now with you here, maybe together we can." She took the notebook, her fingers trembling, as she flipped through cryptic symbols, numbers, and names scattered across the pages. Her eyes caught on a line underlined twice. "The nurse knows the key." Her breath hitched, her own title written across the pages. Her throat tightened. "What does that mean?" she asked. He shook his head. "I do not know, but clearly you were part of something more than you ever realized." The sound of footsteps echoed through the garage, masked figures again closing in. She snapped the notebook, shut her pulse racing. "We need to go now." They darted toward the stairwell, ascending to the surface, their footsteps quick against the concrete. Once outside, the cold air struck them like knives. They hurried into the crowded streets, blending with pedestrians. The man whispered into her ear, "We must find a safe place to decode the notebook, somewhere they cannot reach ours." Later, they found themselves in the dim back room of a small library, its walls lined with forgotten books, the only light from a flickering bulb. She spread the notebook across the table, her fingers tracing the words over and over. "The nurse knows the key." Her memory ached, pressing against the fog. She closed her eyes, trying to force it through, until suddenly a fragment broke free, a whisper in her mind. From years ago, a dying man clutching her hand, telling her where the truth was hidden, whispering words that made no sense then but now sparked like fire. Her eyes flew open, her voice trembling. "I think I know. He hid it in the hospital, the same ward where he died. The truth is still there." She looked at him, determination hardening through her fear. "If we can reach it before my brother, we might have a chance." He nodded, though exhaustion weighed heavy, his voice steady. "Then we go tonight." The hospital loomed in the distance. Hours later, a building both familiar and haunting, the lights glowing sterile against the night sky. She felt her chest tighten every step across the pavement, like walking into the past. Memories clawing their way out of the shadows. She and the man slipped inside. Through a side entrance, the corridors eerily quiet, the hum of machines faint. In the distance they moved quickly, his arm brushing against hers, steadying her as her legs shook from both fear and memory. They reached the ward, the smell of disinfectant clinging to the air, her eyes scanning the walls, the equipment, the old storage room at the end of the hall. Her voice soft. "That is where it happened." She pushed the door open, dust swirling in the air, the room dark and cold, as if untouched for years. She moved inside, her hands trembling, brushing against the shelves until her fingers caught something loose in the wall panel. She pulled, hard wood splintering, until a small box emerged hidden in the cavity. Her heart hammered as she opened it. Inside was a flash drive wrapped in old cloth and a letter yellowed with HI. She unfolded the letter. Her eyes widening as she read the whistleblower's words. I knew they would kill me. I knew they would silence me, but if you are reading this, then the nurse survived, and the key remains within her keep. This evidence saved it contains names, accounts, secrets that will destroy them all. Trust no one, not even family. Her hands shook the letter, slipping from her grip. Tears burned. Her eyes. Her brother had killed this man to protect power and wealth, and she had been the silent witness, erased and forgotten. But now, the truth was in her hands. Her jaw tightened. No longer trembling but burning with rage, she whispered, I will not let him win. The man touched her arm, his voice low and fierce. Then you must be ready, because once he knows you have this, he will come for you himself. The words had barely left his lips when the sound of heavy footsteps filled the hallway. The creak of doors opening, the metallic click of weapons being readied. Her blood froze. She shoved the drive into her pocket, clutching it tight as the door burst open, masked figures storming in, weapons aimed, and behind them, stepping into the room with calm, deliberate steps, came her brother, his face older, harder than she remembered, but unmistakable, his eyes cold as stone when they met hers. He smiled faintly, but the smile never reached his eyes. Sister, he said, his voice smooth and chilling. I always wondered when the past would return to you. I suppose I should thank him for saving your life twice, but now you have seen too much again, and I cannot allow you to destroy everything I built. Her breath caught anger and grief crashing together. Why, she whispered, her voice breaking. Why kill him? Why erase me? His smile faded, his expression sharpening, because power is survival, and survival means sacrifice. He stepped closer, his voice colder. I spared you once because you were my blood, but blood does not mean loyalty, and now you stand against me. The man she had saved stepped forward, his voice sharp. You killed him because he had proof. You killed him because he would have ended you. Her brother's gaze shifted to him, filled with disdain. And you should have died years ago. Instead, she saved you again. Fate is cruel. The tension exploded. Masked figures, tightening their grip, weapons raised. Her brother's hand lifting to signal the end, but before he could finish, she shouted, wait, her voice shaking but strong, her eyes burning with fury. You killed him. You erased me. You shattered everything. But this ends tonight. Her brother tilted his head, curious and mocking. And what will you do, nurse? Expose me? No one will believe you. Her hand tightened around the flash drive in her pocket, her voice trembling with resolve. I do not need them to believe me. I just need the truth to be seen. He moved toward her, but in that instant the lights in the hospital flickered, then went black, plunging the room into darkness. Shouts erupted, chaos filling the space. She felt a hand grab hers, pulling her toward the door, his voice urgent. We must go now. She stumbled through the dark, her heart pounding, clutching the drive, as if it were life itself behind her. She heard her brother's voice echo through the chaos. Find them, do not let her leave alive. They ran through the corridors, the night filled with echoes of pursuit. Her brother's men closing in, but she no longer felt fear, only fire burning in her chest. The truth was in her hands, and she would carry it to the end, no matter what it cost us. They burst through the emergency exit into the night air. She knew the final reckoning was coming. The truth could no longer stay hidden, and the bond of blood would soon be tested in ways that would break her or set her free forever. The night air was cold against her skin as she ran from the hospital, her lungs burning, her hand clutching the flash drive as though it was the only thing keeping her alive. The man ran beside her, his breath ragged, but his eyes blazing with determination. Behind them the shouts of masked figures echoed, growing closer, the sound of boots slamming against pavement, the relentless chase closing in. They darted through the empty parking lot, the city lights flickering in the distance, her heart pounding not only from fear but from the weight of what she carried, the truth of a murder, the betrayal of blood, the shadow of a brother who had turned into a monster. They slipped into the maze of streets, weaving between alleyways, until the chaos of sirens filled the air, police cars racing past, but she knew the ones chasing her had more power than law, more reach than any authority. They found refuge in a crumbling church, its doors barely standing, its halls empty, save for the smell of dust and forgotten prayers. She collapsed against the pew, her chest heaving. The man leaned against the altar, his hand pressing to his side, blood seeping through his shirt. She gasped, moving to him. You are hurt. He shook his head, his eyes fierce. This is nothing compared to what must be done. You must get the drive out to the world before your brother finds you. Tears blurred her vision. The thought of losing him after everything cut deeper than she expected. He had become more than the man she saved. Twice he had become the only anchor in a storm tearing her life apart. She whispered brokenly, I cannot do this alone. His hand gripped hers tight, his voice steady even through pain. You are stronger than you know. They erased your memory, they tried to bury you, but you stood back up and you found the truth again. That strength will carry you. Before she could respond, the heavy creak of doors echoed through the church. Her blood froze, footsteps entering slow, deliberate, her brother's voice filling the silence. Cold as steel, you cannot run forever, sister. You should have stayed forgotten. She pulled the flash drive from her pocket, her hand shaking, but her voice steady. This ends tonight. He stepped into the dim light, his eyes sharp, his suit immaculate even. In the chaos, flanked by two masked figures, weapons ready, he looked at her not as a brother but as an adversary, his words sharp. I built everything on control, power, influence. You think one drive can undo me? You are a fool. Her tears burned, but her anger surged stronger. I think the world deserves to know what you did, she said, her voice trembling with fury. You killed him. You erased me, you destroyed everything, and for what? Money, power, reputation. He smirked coldly. Survival, he said simply. The world is cruel and only those willing to sacrifice can rise. I sacrificed him, and I would sacrifice you too. If it means keeping my empire. The man she saved stepped forward, his voice raw with anger. Your empire is built on lies and blood, and tonight it ends. Her brother's eyes narrowed, his hand lifting in signal. The masked figures stepped closer, weapons raised, but she raised her hand, shouting, no, not this time. Her voice cracked but firm. I will not let you silence me again. In a flash she pulled her phone, plugging the drive into a small adapter, her fingers trembling as she hit send, attaching files to every contact, every journalist, every platform she could reach. Her brother's eyes widened, fury breaking through his calm facade. What have you done? He roared. She met his gaze with tears and defiance. I gave the truth to the world. Chaos erupted, the masked figures lunging forward, shots ringing through the church wood, splintering walls shaking. She and the man dove behind the pew, the air filled with smoke and echoes. He pulled her close, shielding her as bullets flew. She clenched the phone to her chest, watching the upload bar tick upward, slow, agonizing. Her brother shouted to destroy the device, but it was too late. The final bar turned green. The files sent the truth. Unleashed. Raj twisted her brother's face. He stormed forward, his weapon aimed at her. But before the shot could fire, the man she saved threw himself into the path. The bullet tearing through him, he collapsed against her, blood spilling across her hands, her scream tearing from her throat. She cradled him, trembling, her heart breaking. He looked at her, eyes fading yet filled with peace, his whisper soft, you finished it. You gave the world the truth. Do not let him take that from you. Her tears streamed down her face as she held him, his body heavy in her arms. Her brother stood above her, weapon still raised, but his hands shook, his empire collapsing outside. Sirens wailed, helicopters roared, the sound of chaos spreading across the city as the evidence reached the world. His mask of control crumbling before her eyes, she stood slowly, laying the man down, her own fear burned away by rage and grief. She looked her brother in the eye, her voice raw. You are finished. The world knows now. You cannot erase me again. You cannot erase him. You cannot erase the truth. His face twisted with fury, but beneath it, she saw fear. The first crack in his armor as the sound of police closing in grew louder. He backed away, snarling, you may have won tonight, but you have lost everything you loved. She stepped closer, her voice steady, even as her heart broke. Maybe, but I still have myself, and I still have the truth, and that is more than you will ever have. The doors burst open, armed officers storming inside, voices shouting orders. Her brother's men tried to fight but were quickly overpowered. Her brother stood frozen, his weapon slipping from his hand as he was dragged down, his eyes locked onto hers, filled with venom and betrayal. As he was taken away, silence followed, heavy and broken. She sank to the floor beside the man she had saved twice, her tears falling onto his lifeless face. The world outside erupted with news outlets broadcasting the truth, names exposed, corruption shattered. But inside the church she sat in the quiet, her heart torn open. Days later she stood at his grave, the air cool, the sky gray, flowers trembling in the wind. She placed her hand against the stone, her voice trembling. Thank you for trusting me, for fighting with me, for giving me the strength I thought I had lost. I will carry your memory with me always. She turned from the grave, her life forever changed. The quiet retirement she once knew, gone, replaced with scars and truths that cut deep. Yet in her heart she carried something new, a fire, a strength born from betrayal and loss. She had faced her brother She had faced her past, and though broken, she was free and, as she walked into the uncertain future, she whispered to herself sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find who you really are. The end.